DC's multiverse is rich and diverse, and features many different alternate stories and alternate versions of some of our most beloved characters. Some of these stories are designed as Elseworlds Stories, a publication imprint for the comics giant that features stories that take place outside of the DC Universe canon. Today, we are taking a closer look at the most surreal, absurd, and wickedly different of them, with our list of the top 10 craziest DC Elseworlds comics. And, if we're being perfectly honest, the majority of these stories circulate around DC's big three. We're talking Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. There's also quite a few spoilers on this list if you haven't read these series or graphic novels, so heads up for that. So with that in mind, let's get to it. Number 10. Batman Holy Terror. A one-shot published in 1991, Batman Holy Terror was the first graphic novel to ever bear the Elseworlds logo. It takes place in an alternate timeline where the US is a Commonwealth nation ruled by a corrupt theocratic government. In it, Bruce Wayne, 22 years after the death of his parents, plans on joining the clergy, until James Gordon informs him of the truth behind his parents' death. It wasn't a random mugging, but rather a state-planned execution. It's revealed that the government brainwashes and tortures people, especially those who are anti-government radicals. Thomas Wayne was one of those radicals. A physician who attempted to treat those who had undergone experiments, aversion therapy, had been impregnated due to experiments, you name it. Bruce decides to start a crusade, hunting down the people responsible for his parents' assassinations. He becomes a priest, dons a costume that his father once wore in a play, and ends up discovering that the highest court of government, the Star Chamber, are the ones to blame. They have testing facilities in which characters like Barry Allen are forced into experiments that tamper with splicing their genes. He also stumbles upon the corpse of Superman, known as Project Green Man, an alien child that was found in Kansas who was raised and studied by the state. The older he got, the more difficult it was for the government to control him, so they killed him using an irradiated rock found in his spaceship. All in all, it's a pretty dark graphic novel. And at number 9, Superman the Feral Man of Steel. The Feral Man of Steel is an Elseworlds one-shot published in 1994 that puts Kal-El in the 19th century, having him raised by wolves. So yeah, you probably guessed it, it's a story that is loosely based on the Mowgli series, with aspects of Tarzan peppered in. Superman's ship crashes into a jungle in India, and the baby Kal-El is saved by a pack of Indian wolves from a Bengal tiger. As the boy grows, he develops powers along with a new power that allows him to communicate with animals. Lois Lane is later brought into the narrative, falling in love with him, and Lex Luthor also makes an appearance as a power-hungry explorer in search of fame and riches. He's got mutton chops and a full head of hair too, which is pretty great. He ends up taking Kal-El to England and attempts to force the Feral Man of Steel to assassinate Queen Victoria, using a kryptonite jewel to attempt to manipulate him. And at number 8, JLA the Nail. JLA the Nail is seen as one of the best Elseworlds series to date. Published in 1998, its story surrounded a parallel universe in which the Kent's truck hits a nail in the road, giving them a flat tire and ultimately starting a domino effect in which they aren't the ones to discover Kal-El. Superman is non-existent in this world, and flash forward to the future, the Justice League still does exist, but sans the Man of Steel. But because of the lack of his presence, there's a whole lot of other difficult factors in play for our remaining heroes. Perry White and Metropolis Mayor Lex Luthor conduct an anti-metahuman propaganda campaign. Hawkman dies after a battle with a Mazo. Green Arrow becomes a paraplegic with a bitter taste towards the JLA. Metahumans begin to get captured and eliminated one by one, starting with villains but eventually moving on to the Doom Patrol and the Outsiders. The Joker liberates Arkham Asylum, kills Robin and Batgirl, and then traps Batman. Catwoman manages to save him, but in the process, the Joker commits suicide, which looks like a murder, ultimately tarnishing the JLA's reputation. Things only accelerate from there, so you should definitely check out The Nail. Moving on to another famous Elseworlds title, in at 7, Kingdom Come. Created by Mark Waid and Alex Ross, this 1996 4-issue miniseries is a deconstructionist tale set in an alternate future in which the world of superheroes has been divided into two types: visibly out-of-touch heroes and a growing population of reckless, irresponsible, and amoral vigilantes, many of which are the offspring of the traditional superheroes. Batman is stuck in the middle, desperately trying to damage control the escalating situation. It's a story that has been considered Ross's grand opus about the characters of DC and has been compared to the likes of Watchmen and Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes, the writer's infamous lost work. The traditional superheroes of the Justice League end up abandoning their positions and duties when a new superhero by the name of Magog rises up, who kills the Joker while the villain is on his way to a trial for the mass murders of the staff at the Daily Planet. After Magog ends up accidentally killing millions in the American Midwest and destroying a huge amount of the country's food produce resources, Wonder Woman convinces Superman to return to Metropolis and reform the JLA. Of course, Batman has some beef with his best pal, resenting him for walking away 10 years ago and letting the world become what it has. And he insists his old methods won't work with this new generation of heroes. And that's just the first chunk of the story. It gets more intense from there. And at number 6, Wonder Woman Woman Amazonia. From 1997, this one-shot takes place between the years of 1888 and 1928, in a steampunk alternate reality after a mysterious explosion killed Queen Victoria and her entire immediate family. An American man called Jack Planters appears with a claim to be a distant relative and is crowned king. Turns out he is responsible for the death of the royal family, and under his rule the British Empire becomes more militaristic, declaring war on France. And it's super misogynistic, suspending all the rights of women within this newly established and harsh patriarchy. So now is where Wonder Woman comes in. Steve Trevor, a villain in this reality, comes to Paradise Island and kidnaps Diana, forcing her to marry him. She ends up becoming a theater star in London, but eventually takes on the Wonder Woman persona, organizing a resistance against King Jack. Moving on to number 5, the Batman and Dracula Trilogy. Here we have a trilogy in which Batman crosses paths with Count Dracula. Told over the course of 3 graphic novels, Red Rain, Bloodstorm, and Crimson Mist, it was released between 1991 and 1998. Batman finds Dracula and his minions feeding on the homeless in Gotham. He ends up getting himself bitten in order to defeat Dracula in an attempt to match his strength. He impales the iconic character with a tree, but that's when his troubles really start. He develops a bloodlust and starts to go around brutally murdering his rogues gallery, including the Joker. Alfred and Commissioner Gordon are forced to stake him, but the stake is eventually removed by Alfred during a crime wave in Gotham, with Two-Face and Killer Croc being the only surviving villains, teaming up to try to get Batman once and for all. And at number 4, Superman Red Sun. What if Superman was raised in the Soviet Union? That's the question this Elseworlds comic aims to answer. Nominated for an Eisner Award and a recipient of a ton of other acclaim, this 3-issue limited series is set in an alternate reality in which Superman's rocket ship lands in the Ukraine, all thanks to his ship departing a little later than it did in the Prime timeline, with the Earth's rotation changing the location in which it landed. Superman becomes the Soviet Union's champion of the common worker, fighting a never-ending battle for Stalin and socialism. But because of this, he ends up becoming a bit of a tyrant. Lex Luthor, a scientist employed by Star Labs, is hired by the CIA to destroy Superman in the midst of the Cold War. He later becomes the president of the USA. Meanwhile, Batman is in this universe working as the Resistance leader against Superman. He is later killed but becomes a martyr, with a resistance group called the Batmen wearing copycats of his costume carrying on the cause. Moving on to number 3, Gotham by Gaslight. This one-shot released in 1989 is set in the 19th century, and follows Bruce Wayne's origin story of becoming Batman during the rise of Jack the Ripper's reign of terror in Gotham City. It's technically the first Elseworlds story, despite not being labeled as such, with it later being given the imprint. Now the story begins in 1889 with Bruce Wayne studying under Freud. After analyzing a reoccurring dream where he recalls his parents' murder, he decides to go back to Gotham City. When in Gotham, Inspector Gordon shows Bruce the case files behind a man who poisoned his wife and tried to commit suicide, leaving him with a permanent grin. Wonder who that's inspired by. Bruce takes up the Batman mantle, and just as he does, Jack the Ripper comes to the city, commits a series of murders that some people actually blame on Batman, but eventually Batman and the Ripper come face to face as Bruce interrupts him, during one of his murders that is. It's revealed that the man behind the Ripper is actually an acquaintance of Bruce's, Jacob Parker, who's been going around killing women who reminded him of Bruce's mother, whom he was in love with and was rejected by. Parker was the one responsible for hiring an assassin to kill his parents. Moving on to number 2, Superman Speeding Bullets. Another one-shot on our list, Speeding Bullets was released in 1993, and explores the life of a superhero who is the amalgamation of Batman and Superman. Kal-El is sent to Earth and is found by Thomas and Martha Wayne, who name him Bruce. The Waynes one night are gunned down by a mugger, and Bruce uses his heat vision to kill the mugger. Flash forward several years later, Bruce has become a recluse. That rhymes. Living inside of Wayne Manor, but his super hearing allows him to hear all of the cries of those in Gotham. One night, when armed robbers break into the house and take Alfred hostage, he uses his superpowers and attacks them. That's when Alfred takes Bruce down into a cave below the mansion to show him his rocket ship, to teach him where he came from. Bruce dons the mantle of Batman and begins his crusade in Gotham. The rest of the story finds Bruce facing off against Lex Luthor. He begins to take the shape as an amalgamation of himself and the Joker after an accident leaves him disfigured, and later Bruce ends up adopting the Superman persona. And finally, at number 1, the German Expressionist Trilogy. The German Expressionist Trilogy isn't known in name by that. Rather, it's a trilogy made up of 3 different graphic novels, all within the same world, yet each individually unique. The reason why these 3 are referenced as such is because the graphic novels are based on German Expressionist cinema. The first, Superman's Metropolis, is based off of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis. Batman Nosferatu is based off the classic horror film of the same name, and Wonder Woman the Blue Amazon takes after the Blue Angel. Metropolis takes place in the future, in the city of Metropolis, in which social inequality immortality is a massive problem. An evil scientist named Luthor has the city wrapped around his finger, ends up seeking out the leader of the rising revolution, Lois Lane, and uses her to create a robotic duplicate that he names Futura. After learning about his alien origins, Clark ends up fighting Futura, rescues Lois, defeats Luthor, and he and Lois end up becoming the new enlightened rulers of the city. You kinda get the gist from that, with the films informing the plots of these stories, being adapted to fit into the origins of the 3 DC heroes that star within them. Alright, there we have it, friends. What other Elseworlds titles do you think are absolutely crazy? Which ones do you love? Which ones do you hate? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know all of your thoughts and feels. In the meantime though, if you dug this video, spread the love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more lists just like this one. Thanks for watching, friends. I'll catch you all in the next video.